this security training series on understanding the hidden costs of securing connected devices. My name is Brent Wilson. I joined Silicon Labs in 2003 and held various leadership roles in our microcontroller and wireless technology groups in applications, systems, and firmware. Silicon Labs is a provider of wireless IoT SoCs and modules which support low-power, short-range protocols such as Bluetooth Low Energy, Bluetooth Mesh, Zigbee, Z-Wave, and Thread, as well as proprietary networks based on 2.4 GHz or sub-gigahertz ISM bands. We make other products as well, but in the IoT group, we focus primarily on wireless devices that support these protocols. In June 2018, I formed the Product Security Team, which is an outward-facing group whose mission is to help our customers design secure systems. What I'll be sharing with you today are some of the lessons learned from working with our customers who have deployed IoT devices to the field, and because of the evolution of security and security requirements, they need to go back to these products and add security to them or to upgrade the security of those products in service. But first, I would like to talk a little bit about why we need security in the IoT by using some example test cases. No one sets out, we believe, to make products that cause harm to people. But without implementing proper security in products, it's possible to create such harm by accident. The example shown on the screen is a smartwatch that was enabled with both GPS and cellular functionality that was designed for parents to give to their kids. The kids would wear these devices, and as they go out and play in the neighborhood, the parents can use the watch to both locate the kids and also, if they need to, they can actually establish a voice connection to the child to say, now it's time to come home for dinner, for example. One of the problems with the implementation of this system was that the cloud service that was taking in all of the data from these watches was not secured. The access to the databases was not properly authenticated, and a potentially malevolent hacker person could not only track children by using the GPS capabilities of the watches, but they could also communicate directly with children using the voice link. Because of the safety risk of these products, the EU issued a recall, which actually took them off the shelves in order to protect the people. This is another example. And by the way, all of the examples that I'm showing you here were companies who followed the rules of proper disclosure and mitigation, so none of these exploits are still active. But these are all incidents which made headlines at the time that the patches were available to the market. This is showing a vulnerability in some electric scooters. In this case, a user connects to the scooter via a smartphone app, and the app communicates both with a cloud service as well as with the scooter directly in order to unlock the parking brake and such. The issue here was that the protocol between the smartphone and the scooter was not properly authenticated, which enabled any hacker with knowledge of the protocol to send commands to any scooter within RF range, regardless of whether the scooter was being operated by another rider. The hacker could command the scooters to stop or accelerate suddenly, which could place the riders at risk. This is an example of a Wi-Fi enabled light bulb, where the bulb connects to your Wi-Fi network and then enables you to control the light from your smartphone, or you can incorporate the bulb into a do-it-yourself home automation network. The problem here isn't necessarily an obvious one, but the issue is that the Wi-Fi SoC inside the bulb had a debug interface that wasn't locked, which allowed a hacker to connect a debug probe to those pins and get access to all the memories inside the SoC. One of the attributes that was stored in the non-volatile memory of the SoC was the user's Wi-Fi credentials. So if, for example, you had this bulb connected to your network, and later the light burns out, or you get tired of it and you throw it in the trash, someone could steal the bulb from your trash and extract your Wi-Fi credentials, enabling them to join your home Wi-Fi network. This is an example of a trash can attack, in which sensitive user information such as Wi-Fi credentials or user passwords, or even personally identifiable information, is not protected by encryption, or the interfaces to that device have not been properly secured so that they can leak that information into the wrong hands and cause harm. This scenario is a consistent problem with a lot of different smart home devices, because neither product makers nor end users are used to treating smart home products like potential security threats. In contrast, most users know that when it's time to retire a laptop or desktop computer, the drives on the computer need to be wiped and thoroughly destroyed. Most of us don't treat smart bulbs or home appliances with the same degree of care when it's time to throw them away, but we should. There are a number of emerging regulations and industry guidelines around IoT security, and I'm not going to provide a huge catalog of all the different options, but I did want to share one industry initiative called IOXT, of which Silicon Labs is a proud board-level member. IOXT is an industry consortium which includes component makers like Silicon Labs and NXP, as well as product makers and ecosystem providers like Comcast, Google, and Amazon. all trying to solve the problem of IoT security together in a way that is beneficial for end users and achievable and consistent for product makers. The IOXT Charter is based around 8 clear principles, which are shown here, and a few of these have direct security implications on the product itself and also on the SoC chipset that implements these certain aspects of the security. The first of these is principle number 2, which is that all product interfaces shall be appropriately secured by the manufacturer. What this means, for example, is that before you ship your product to the field, you need to make sure that all debug interfaces to the product have been locked down so that you eliminate the trash can attack possibility. The interfaces also include other wired interfaces such as serial terminal connections, as well as wireless interfaces such as Wi-Fi or Bluetooth Low Energy. Wireless interfaces in particular need to be secured by encryption and properly authenticated in order to prevent eavesdropping and man-in-the-middle attacks. Principle number 3 is that the product security should use strong, proven, updatable crypto algorithms. This principle actually contains 2 chief ideas. The first of these is that the security tools in the toolbox should be those which are already proven and appropriate for use based on existing standards. This includes using algorithms like AES for encryption and using established public key technologies for checking signatures and for signing objects for secure upgrades. The second chief idea is that the cryptographic implementation should support secure upgrades so that when hackers or security researchers identify a vulnerability in the system, the implementation can be patched to remove the vulnerability. The third principle is that the product only accepts properly signed software updates. And that means that whenever the devices receive an upgrade package, they check it for authenticity, and if it doesn't pass that authenticity check, the device won't apply the upgrade. In order to evaluate the energy costs of adding security to this system, we're going to focus on 3 specific cryptographic functions to add to the product to address these 3 security principles. The features are Authenticated Encryption, specifically AES CCM, used to authenticate and encrypt messages in order to establish a secured wireless communication link. Secure Key Establishment, specifically ECDHE, which is used to derive the secret key used for encrypting the wireless communication. Signed firmware upgrades, specifically the combination of the SHA-256 hash algorithm with the ECDSA verify public key function used to verify digital signatures for secure boot or secure upgrade operations. So let's look at these in the context of a specific use case, which is a Bluetooth LE temperature sensor. The primary reason for choosing this particular use case is because it is a battery-operated system using a CR2032 lithium coin cell as the power source, and we want the battery life to last at least 5 years. If you're a product maker and you designed this system, you would be aware that trying to get 5 years of battery life from the coin cell in a wireless system like this is a hard thing to do. And you might be under the impression that if you take that hard, challenging problem and now add security requirements, like the need to encrypt and authenticate the wireless interfaces and to secure the code updates to the device, you might have the feeling that these security additions would have too much of a negative impact on the battery life. The purpose of this presentation is to show that that's not necessarily the case. This table shows the key system requirements and assumptions for this Bluetooth LE temperature sensor use case. The SoC specifications here are a blended representation of commonly available devices in the market. The CPU type is listed as Cortex-M4, but really any Cortex-M device could be substituted. The specific relevance for the CPU is that it is Cortex-M, or MCU class, and not Cortex-A, or Applications class. This is a resource-constrained processor that is suitable for microcontroller class applications. The clock frequency is 40 MHz, active power is about 10 milliwatts, sleep power is about 3 microwatts, and then there are some radio parameters and BLE parameters as well. These MCU specifications are a blended and simplified representation of several actual products in the market. The key point is that in this use case, the temperature sensor takes a temperature measurement approximately once every 20 seconds, and then will broadcast that measurement over a BLE advertisement. And then once a day, the sensor will connect to a smartphone, establish a secure connection with that smartphone, and upload all the log data that it has taken since its last connection to the smartphone. We also assume that this product can support field updates, but those happen fairly infrequently, at most once per month. The first challenge is to add encryption and authentication to the wireless interface. The way we do this in Bluetooth Low Energy is to use AES CCM, which is the encryption algorithm mandated by the Bluetooth specification. AES-CCM is a special type of encryption algorithm which also provides integrity and authentication protection. What we're showing here in the table is 3 different rows corresponding to different implementations of AES-CCM. The first row is a software-only implementation, which doesn't make use of any hardware acceleration capabilities on the device. The second row shows the performance with an AES accelerator of a hardware performance class that was commonplace in devices introduced around 5 years ago. The third row shows the performance with a newer AES accelerator that was introduced last year. The workload for this algorithm that we're using for our test case here is to encrypt and authenticate a 32-byte payload. The columns indicate the time that the encryption operation takes, expressed both in cycles and in microseconds, along with the energy required by the operation. It's useful to compare the energy costs of these encryption operations with the energy cost required to transmit 32 bytes at 1 megabit per second at a transmit power level of 0 dBm. This comparison shows that even in the software implementation of AES-CCM, where there's no hardware acceleration included, the energy required for the encryption operation is substantially lower than the amount of energy required for the communications operation, and it's a huge factor of over 600. Now we look at the impact of adding these various encryption implementations to our use case to evaluate the impact of each on the expected battery life of the system. We need to encrypt the data at each reporting interval of 20 seconds. So we look at the relationship between the energy required to perform the encryption compared with the energy that is allocated to the reporting interval, which in this case is 250 microjoules. What the data shows is that even implementing the least efficient software-only encryption algorithm has a modest impact on the battery life, reducing it only around 9 days over a 5-year span. One of the challenges with AES or any symmetric key encryption or decryption algorithm is that if you want to decrypt a message, you have to use the same key that was used to encrypt the message. And delivering that key to the person doing the decrypting in a secure way ends up being one of the harder problems to solve. One way to solve this key delivery problem is to use a public key technology like Diffie-Hellman. In our use case, we are implementing a variant of Diffie-Hellman that uses elliptic curve technology in conjunction with an ephemeral or temporary key pair. And the abbreviation for this is ECDHE, which stands for Elliptic Curve Diffie-Hellman Ephemeral. Public key operations, such as ECDHE, consume quite a bit of CPU resources. So you can see here that the software implementation of the algorithm takes about 63.6 million cycles to accomplish, which at 40 megahertz takes almost 1.6 seconds to complete. Hardware acceleration definitely makes that performance much better, as the performance with an accelerator takes only 3.3 million cycles, or about 83 milliseconds to complete. Newer cryptographic engines take less than a million cycles and around 19 milliseconds for the same operation. In our use case, ECDHE is used once per day when the BLE temperature sensor establishes a secure connection with the smartphone in order to upload its temperature log data to the phone. The battery energy allotment for 1 day is about 1100 millijoules, so even the software implementation of 16 millijoules is very small compared to the energy budget of a full day. So it doesn't actually impact the battery life of the system much at all, amounting to about 1 month over the course of 5 years. One thing about public key operations is that because they are computationally intensive, they are often readily perceptible in human time. So you need to be conscientious of your user experience, that they're aware whenever they establish this communication with the smartphone, that getting the connection up and running may take a noticeable amount of time for a software-only implementation. Hardware-accelerated implementations that require 83 milliseconds or 19 milliseconds may be perceptible, but aren't burdensome or likely to create a user annoyance. The other security requirement from IOXT is that all devices support only authenticated software upgrades. And for software upgrades, we use 2 cryptographic tools in the toolbox. One of these is a hashing algorithm, like SHA-256, and the other is a public key signature verification algorithm like ECDSA Verify, which stands for Elliptic Curve Digital Signature Algorithm. The way that Secure Boot or Secure Update authentication methods work is that first a hash is computed across the binary boot image or update image, and then the signature at the end of that image is verified with the computed hash and a public verification key that is stored on the device. If the authentication passes, the device is allowed to boot or is allowed to process the upgrade. If the authentication fails, the device hangs in the boot process or discards the update. The energy required for the hash computation depends on the size of the image. In this case, we assume the code image or the update image is 512 kilobytes. This computation takes around 30 million cycles, or about 3/4 of a second in a software-only implementation. The ECDSA verify operation does not depend on the size of the image, and takes about 67 million cycles, or about 1.7 seconds in software. However, even though these operations take time, the frequency of firmware updates is low. Here we are assuming an update cadence of once per month, which is high. Most products will receive updates between twice per year and once every 2 to 3 years. The energy budget for 1 month of operation is about 33 joules, so the impact of adding secure updates ends up being less than 2 days reduction in battery life over a 5-year period. However, as in the ECDHE case, the public key operations take a noticeable amount of time to complete, 2.4 seconds in the case of the software-only implementation. So you will want to make sure your end users are aware of this to avoid causing annoyance. This table shows the summary impacts of adding these 3 security features to the Bluetooth LE coin cell use case. Even in the software-only implementation with no hardware acceleration support, the battery life is reduced a little over 1 month across a 5-year period, which is not a significant performance impact. With hardware acceleration, the impact is even less. In summary, adding security features to a wireless product, even a low-power coin cell operated one, has a modest impact on overall battery life. Hardware acceleration for AES and public key operations is helpful, both from an energy use standpoint as well as end-user experience and convenience. Hardware cryptographic implementations may be desirable over software implementations for security reasons, such as increased robustness to side-channel attacks like differential power analysis.